I have a disclaimer, and that is the accuracy of the account of the number of the deaths always have been disputed among prisoners. But the mass murder committed by Iranian Republic, Islamic Republic of Iran, is the fact. They were converted from the Iranian calendars to the Western calendars. Therefore, they do not reflect accurate date. However, the conditions are completely accurate. If I'm using any word of revolution in this presentation, please make sure that I do not imply there is an economical and social changes that happen in Iran simply by replacing the monarch. Some pictures may not be suitable for some. I'm sorry about that. And I'm apologizing to say I cannot say my history in 20 minutes. So don't criticize me of saying that you didn't say that, you didn't say that. Give me 200 minutes, I will cover the whole thing. Martin Numer says, when the Nazi came for the communists, I did not speak out as I was not a communist. When they locked up the Social Democrat, I did not speak out. I was not a Social Democrat. When they came for the trade unionists, I did not speak out as I was not a trade unionist. When they came for the Jews, I did not speak out as I was not a Jew. Guess what? When they came for me, there was no one left to speak out. I think that there was many discussion here as how the monarch left and how Khomeini came. I'm not going to get into it, but the day before yesterday, two of my friends, Bahram and Taraab, they talk about it, and Taraab today had a little touch on that one, so I'm not going to go through that one. I think that I kind of completely agree with them. Khomeini, like everybody in the world, like Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, and everybody else, when they come to the before the power, said exactly the same thing. Marxists are free to express their opinion. If I make a mistake, people should warn me. Islamic regime is not a dictatorship. Monarch is against of human rights. Papers or print must write what people want. Water, gas, and utility will be free of charge. All political groups should be uniting, and mullahs should not be president. As many of you may know, 4 out of the 6 presidents in Iran from 1981, they're all mullahs. Please pay attention to what they said also. There is no forced hijab, nor any torture will be, any torture will be forbidden in Iran. But what happened after that, they started to execute the Pahlavis upper echelon on February of 1979. 2,000 members of Shah's regime were executed in 1979 alone by Khalkhali's own admission on the 1919 memoir. Khalkhali said, if they were guilty, they will go to hell, and if they were innocent, they will go to heaven. And he said, I would do exactly the same again. And as Newshin was said, he is considered as a moderate. And I'm so sorry, and I'm so sorry, and I'm so upset that I see her daughter going to talk in these social forums, without saying what her father did is condemned. So please pay attention what Newshin said. Many of them today, they are alive. They are moderate people. And Khalkhali was one of those. In March of 1978, in a Women's International Day, and as you have seen in Masoud's films, they came out and they were working against what we actually had heard before they come. He said there is no forced hijab. I wasn't a woman. I didn't come to speak out. I wasn't monarch. I did not speak out either. They started the massacre of Arabs in Khuzestan in the late April, about until the May of 1979. Arabs in Khuzestan began protesting against the discrimination. But mass gunmen killed about 100 Arabs in Khorramshahr. I wasn't Arab. I was not Arab. In Turkmen-Sahara, they attacked the first time in March of 1979, and second was in February of 80s. And Turkmen-Sahara, I will show you in the picture later on, but Turkmen, they actually had a big history of, I'm not going to that, began to resolve the land issue in Turkmen-Sahara, and land confiscated by Pahlavi general was given back to the ethnic Turkmen groups. But more than 100 Turkmen ethnic people, mostly unarmed women and children and elders, they were hidden in their house with murder. And guess who killed them? Khalkhali. He admitted by himself on October 22nd in 1987, I killed 4 of their leaders. This is one of their leaders. And where was that person? Where those 4 found? It was in the ditch outside of the city. You call him moderate. You invite her daughter over here talking in the social forum. You tell me, am I mad? Yes. And of course, what happened, magazines and the prints. There are 2 really structured in the society. One is the prints and magazine, and the second thing is the university students. They actually started to talk about what's happening in the country. And by the way, in Iran, after that so-called revolution, 3 months after that, 200 new magazine print published daily and weekly. Just in 3 months, 200 of them. And not long after, Oyandagan was shut down. And also, there were 69 other papers like Kayhan Azad, Peygam Emruz and Ahangar. They were all in Turkish publication. They were all banned. And Article 29, 30, and 31 established says offenses committed by the press shall be dealt with in a criminal court from 6 months to 2 years. You cannot talk anymore. Shut up. In Bandar Anzali, north of Iran, population 500,000. On October 23rd, 1979, the issue was a fishery, 17 deaths and 53 injured. One of the most devastating things in Iran was the Kurdistan, which was basically uprising in March of 1979. And Kurds, by all means, they have also the cultural issues and religious issues. But in 1979 of June, Khomeini called jihad against the Kurds. And about 100,000 people were killed in that course, and with 12 of them being political prisoners. And a speech on December 1797, Khomeini, who said in the beginning before the revolution so-called, called the concept of ethnic minority contrary to Islamic doctrine. And 27th of 1979 in San Najiman, 11 Kurdish prisoners were executed by firing squad, followed a 30-minute so-called trial under Shia leader, guess who? Khalkhali. And as you can see, the gentleman that is actually laying down, his name was Ahsan Nahid on stretcher. And among of those, there was Dr. Abul Qasim Rashvandi Sardari, who was executed because he was helping the wounded. None of the political people, they talk about Garna massacre. What's outstanding about Garna massacre is one of the most painful human tragedy of the Kurdistan wars. That innocent people of the village have been killed. On September 2nd, 1979, around 1 p.m., the forces under the commander of Mullah Asani launched an assault in the village of Garna using tanks and cannons. Based on the names and statistics available, 64 citizens, the government state says actually 46 people died. Do you know how big was? How big was the village? This is where they were. 80 households. Out of 80 households, they are actually killed so many. So what happened, the magazines are gone. Now the students are the one that is voices of the people. So what do? They come to close of the university. Guess what I did? I was there. No one was to speak. I am one of the students. They came to us. On May 4, 1980, Ahvaz University was attacked, the first one. Several students were arrested and murdered. On April 29 in 1980, they attacked and 300 students were hospitalized. Many were killed. And it's between June 5th and June 12th university, they shut down all the universities. 1/3 of the students and 2/3 of the teachers, around 20,000 were dismissed. These are the names of the people that I wrote in Farsi. But you should know, every one of them, they were the one who decided, I should get out of the university. The first one, Abdul Karim Surush, he's outside and he's talking about democracy. I want to have him to come and say, why did I get out of the university? I am a university professor here in the United States. I have no right to tell a student to go out. He is coming outside in the United States, in England and everywhere, and talk about democracy while he actually kicked me out of the university. And that's what I want you to realize. Realize the real lives. And only you can realize that. And of course, everybody knows about Iran and Iraq war. It lasted about 8 years. It was the first and only conflict in the history of warfare in which both forces actually used the ballistic missiles against each other. And I think Taraab had a little bit touch on that, what happened, how they do that, and what happened about the war. 1.5 million Iraqi soldiers and 600 Iranian soldiers were killed. 100,000 civilians were killed on the both sides, not including 50 to 100,000 civilians killed in the Kurdish genocides. Economic loss was 627 million for Iranian and 561 billion to Iraqis. And then Khomeini, who wanted to take the war, take it to Jerusalem and export his Islamic, whatever crap it is, to there, started drinking the calico poison. He said, I gave up, I defeated. Now, what it had to do with what happened on June 1981 is another subject that we can talk about it for hours and hours and come with some conclusion. But on that day, hundreds of political activists were arrested and hundreds of demonstrators were killed daily. Many arrestees were executed without their name or address known. If you look at the pictures is of the people that they don't know who they are. They printed in the papers and they said, do you know this person? Let their parents know that we already killed them. Come and get the body. The exact number of executees are unknown, but 20 to 30 pictures were posted in the daily paper in Tehran. It is said that it was about 100 to 150 a day. Because they didn't know some of them, they brought them out in the pictures, but about 20, 30. But the total, they are talking about 100, 150 just in Tehran. Every day, we prisoners heard around 100 of coup de grace. You may call it death blow in having prison. Every day. Every day I heard 100. We counted 89 today, 72 today. The next day it was 102. We hear bang, bang, bang. It's like a iron, and we have an expression, we said that it seemed like an iron falling on the ground. Just to give you a little bit concept of what we went through was a cell that it was about 36 square foot, meters. We were 70 of us. I was living and I was laying down when we were sleeping. My foot, my ankles, was actually touching the crotch of the other. So we were sleeping this way. I could not sleep on my back. We had to sleep on the side because it wasn't enough. That's how it was. And of course, there is a whole story about what the condition of the cell was. In those days, there were tortures, and of course it was torture. There are also almost 71 kind of torture used reported by political prisoners who were personally the victim of these brutal methods. I categorize them to physical, psychological, and sometimes both of them. I cannot name 71 of them, and I cannot come up with all of those. This is a picture that actually is not on those days, because on those days they did not do anything. We didn't have any, I will go through that one a little bit more. These are the pictures that I found about 10, 15 years ago. There was a gentleman, they lashed him. So I took the pictures and tell you what's happened. Solitary confinement, or as now we call them infaradi. You were in the room, alone, dark, nobody was there. Torturing a loved one in front of a prisoner. How do you like your daughter comes over there? And they beat you up in front of your daughter. How do you like to be beaten, your parents, while you are there? I have a friend, a dear friend, and he still is alive. He said, they beat my wife. I wish they would have beaten me. Mock executions. Starving infant to put pressure on the mothers. Crushing the prisoners. Sleep deprivation 24/7. We had so much noises in the hallways and everywhere that we couldn't sleep. Of course, this is not inside of the cell. Threatened to arrest the family members as hostage or hostage them. Blindfold. I was in 11 days blindfolded, 24/7, except in the toilet. Why is that psychological? Everything in my mind was going through hearing, crying, screaming, and yelling and beating. 11 days, night and day. Giving false information about the fate of the family members, confiscating of the properties and family, or threatening to do so. Forcing prisoner to see horrifying scene. I have a case that actually somebody was talking about, that there was a garbage can and they had a broken body of the people inside. This is what we're going to do to you. I was in prison. Somebody came and said, where are you from? I told them where I'm from. I mean, which area, which neighborhood? And I said, I'm from. He said, do you know so-and-so? I pretended I don't know anybody. I said, no. He said, how could it possibly be? It's like you're active, political active in the neighborhood. You don't know him? And I pretended to be an idiot. I said, no, I don't know anything about it. He said, too bad. I said, why? He said, they took him for 3 days, beating him so much, they couldn't take anything out of him. I knew exactly who he was. And they wanted. I think it was him. Sexual assault against prisoner. which was not confined to women either. This is again a picture that I found out on the internet. Again, this is about a couple years ago they came up, but this is what it really happened in prison where we were. If you look at your right side, he started to beat him with whatever he has in hand. They tried in the second upper. The prisoner, they tried to fight back, which we couldn't do that because they put us on the bed, put the hand and the foot. You couldn't move. They put something in your mouth, so we couldn't defend ourselves. And you could at the bottom part of that. That's why they try whatever they want to do. And this is what it ended up. This is not a real prison that we were in. But guess what? When this comes out, what is hidden? What is hidden? I have seen many of them. Beaten to death with cables. Cable is the most really vicious torture that they did on the foot. Cantilever torture, we call them kaponi. They put your hand in the back and they actually close it as much as you can. If you go your hand, you put your hand on, try to reach each other. You can't do that. What they did, they actually put you on the wall somehow that your toes were on the floor. And the other one also was hanging from the ceiling. Your foot was on the floor. I mean, your toes reaches the floor and you were hanging for days. Electrical batons with electrical cables. And also something that Nوشین was talking about, I call them cage, judgment, qiyamah. That was a box that it actually happened many years later, that they put you in a 2-1 by about 1 meter by Hajda wood, that it was actually you were there. Many people, they were there for month and month. Sleep deprivation was one of them. Beating with the wood or metal stick, resulting in the broken bones. Something that Taraab had made mentions of that one, and Bahram, and the other one they talk about is Iran Gate. Why it's important is because on January 1986, Khomeini, who wanted to export the Islamic agenda to Israel, got the order from Reagan to sell 4,000 US-made anti-tank and missiles. And in 86, McFarlane and Oliver North visited Iran, and you guys know about Iran Gate. And of course, CIA Director William Casey was talking about it, was going to talk about it, but unfortunately or fortunately, a day before, on December 15, before he goes to the Senate and talk about the U.S. involvement, Central CIAs were selling to arm, he got a seizure and he died. Execution of Iranian political prisoners, what they call them annihilations of the enemy of Islam, began on 31st June of 1988. Khomeini himself wrote what he wrote, and this is what I call him. This is what I can tell him. I do not call him Ayatollah, I call him the butcher of the history. But it started in July 31st. Everybody was trying to say why it happened, but to my understanding is on July 24th of the same year, trend of transferring prisoner to solitary was accelerated. And a day next, prisoners were given form to fill out. The execution began pursuant a fatwa issued by Khomeini immediately following Iran's announcement that it had agreed to cease fire in a devastating 8 years war in Iraq and Iran. And we do have 482 names, but it's actually, some people, they claim it has to be about 30,000. Guess what? Iranian regime never accepted or agreed and actually denied that it has been taken place. When they took the prisoners, there were two parts. Islamic one, Mujahideen, they asked them, are you willing to denounce former colleagues? Are you willing to denounce them in front of the camera? Are you willing to help us hunt them down? Will you name secret sympathizer? Will you identify phony repentant? Will you go to the war front and walk through enemy's minefield. Guess what? There wasn't any war. It's already gone. But they asked the question. From the lefties, they asked questions. Do you pray or read Quran? Do you believe in God? Are you Muslim? A couple of our friends who survived, they said I was trying to tell him, I am Armenian for God's sake. I've never prayed, I never Islam, I never had a Quran. And they said, it doesn't matter, you live in Iran, you have to be. Though they have actually been subjected to beating that they did a slash on them, lashed them, and they had it, and they were going, my name is Andrea, or Andre. But it didn't matter. What makes the massacre of 1980, now 88, a genocide? There were prisoners that, despite having completed their sentences, were still incarcerated, then taken out and executed. There were prisoners that had not been sentenced to death, but were executed anyway. Political prisoners were called into face kangaroo court of 3 clerics, which right now one of them is actually a minister of Iranian government, Mr. Rouhani. All trials were short, 5 to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, without a right to any defense. It's like they told you, do you believe? And you said, well, can I talk? No, shut up, just say, I'm not Muslim, it doesn't matter. So there is no way that they asked you the question that they wanted you to defend yourself. You should have said yes or no. The interrogation was not based on individual situation, but based on the certain pre-planned question. The massacre was planned after the end of Iran and Iraq war. And actually, to be honest with you, there are a whole history of that we call them Meysam Karasi, that we have it on our website if any Iranian wants to know, that is actually planned in 4 years, 3 years prior to. So there is many of us, we believe it actually was planned before. But this is also, we say, short before the MKO failed military attack on Iran called Forough Javidan in 1988. Not only is ignored, this is very important. Everybody who talks about human rights, where are you? Not only is ignored by the West, because of their complex relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran, but also the UN, I'm emphasizing, but also the UN and International Criminal Court, the Hague Court, have been silenced on the massacre of the last 2 decades. In my book, I am accusing my government, United States government. I'm accusing them. Never they denounced it. Those executed were buried in unmarked mass grave on the outskirts of Tehran. Also the other side. I don't know much about the other part of Tehran, so I apologize for that. The mass burial in Tehran was accidentally discovered by an Armenian priest who became curious as to why stray dogs kept digging there for the bones. Because the mass grave location is close to the cemetery of Armenians. And that's how it was discovered. There is a whole subject that can go on. What happened to us, it's happening today in a different way. As Masood was talking about stoning a woman, so and so they were talking about it. I cannot touch about it, but I really appreciate, look at that woman over there. That is her brother. Her brother and his wife. They had a baby. The baby went to jail. They don't know what happened to that kid. Don't you want to know?
They killed the brother.
The kid's brother. The brother's kid. That girl, that lady over there, the picture is his brother, her brother. The brother and his wife. They were murdered in prison, but they had a baby. What is that baby?
That's a question.
What I talked about it is what happened in Iran, to the north. to the west, to the south, everywhere that it happened. I was hoping that I could touch to tell you that I have the cycles that it went on. So what am I trying to get out of that? Honest with you, I'm not going to go murder the person who hurt me. I'm not here to kill them. I'm not here to do anything with them. But I want you to get out of it. When there is injustice, inequality, and oppression, stand up and fight. Remember, if you do not stand up for the others, there would be no one. There would be no one to stand up for you. Let's unite, stand up, and defend freedom of justice, what I call socialism.
I wish I could speak about something else, because I feel that all of you are traumatized. We need a dance, we need music, a beautiful song, because it's a part of human nature. But it is my unpleasant duty to speak about a similar subject, collective trauma. The first thing I want to share with you is my experience as a trauma counselor with the Canadian Center for Victims of Torture. I have been working there for the last 23 years, and I have seen plenty of survivors of torture, war, genocide, and crimes against humanity, possibly from 100 countries, specifically from Iran. I want to share some of my reflections with you, and I work also as a policy analyst and researcher with the center, and a little bit outcome of my research about the subject. First, trauma. What is trauma? Trauma could be physical, could be emotional, and could be psychological. Suddenly, you get a blow. That blow injures you, maybe physically, emotionally, or psychologically. That is sudden, unexpected, and it is beyond the normal range of a human person to tolerate. That is trauma. And the problem with trauma, dilemma of trauma, is that it doesn't go away. After effects of trauma, what we call it PTSD, remains for the rest of one's life. It has three symptoms. One is intrusion. Intrusion means flashbacks. The memory comes to your mind as if it is happening today, many times, years after the initial trauma. We have avoidance. You avoid places and people that remind you of your trauma, and sometimes you avoid your family members, and occasionally you avoid yourself. It's horrible. And the third one is hyperarousal. You have memory loss. You have nightmares, frequent nightmares. You suffer from lack of sleep. We call it insomnia. And all these symptoms. That is called post-traumatic stress disorder. It could go away if you can train yourself, and if you are powerful enough internally. It might lead to paranoia. It might also stay with you, and you need different levels of support. And according to our experience at the center, 5% of our clients do very well. They have converted the experience of their torture and trauma into something very productive. People like Ali, people like Nوشین, and many of you. So that is human faculty and human capacity. Some 5% become paranoid. I like to share experience of one of my clients. They tortured him and he resisted torture. Finally, they brought his mother, and they said, if you don't give us information, we will kill your mother. Then mother said, my son, don't give them any information. Let them murder me. And they did it. My client has become paranoid. And our challenge is that to stabilize his condition. There is no cure for him. And now let me turn to collective trauma. What happens if everybody is traumatized? The whole society going through a trauma. And trauma reproduces itself on a daily level. Is there any cure for that? Who can help another person? So it's extremely difficult, this experience of collective trauma. Let me share some historical examples of collective trauma. In 12th century BC, Benjaminites, a 12th tribe of Jewish people, they were exterminated. All of them were killed by other Jewish tribes. So there is no name of them in the history. And I tell you one thing, that was not only mass physical annihilation that killed them, it was self-denial also as after effect of collective trauma. When you deny yourself and you try to even assimilate in another tribe, or you forget about your identity. We have other very sad and tragic examples. 6th century BC, Jewish people were sent to exile, and then Cyrus from Iran emancipated them, sent them back to Jerusalem, and in 17th century AD, Jerusalem temple was destroyed, and Jewish people started scattering all over the world. They call it diaspora, and they went through a historical trauma. And during Crusades also, the trauma repeated. And even in 19th century, some 600,000 Jews were massacred in Ukraine. And we all know about Holocaust. That's another example. And we have plenty of examples. According to Engels, history is among the most cruel of all goddesses. It runs its chariot in the dead body of all of us. That is cruelty of history. And we have the experience of Genghis Khan, Timur-Land, who made minaret out of beheaded people, out of their heads. In Isfahan, for example, 800 heads were, he made a huge edifice out of that and sat on the top of that. And some people believe that the accent of people in Isfahan looks like mourning because of that sad experience of collective trauma. We have also experience of genocide under Ottoman Empire, 1915 to 22. And when Hitler was told about that, you be a little bit lenient against 4 groups, gypsies, communists, homosexuals, and Jewish people, said, who after all remembers the Armenian people? Still, after many generations, Armenians suffer. Trauma, collective trauma, has the capacity of transmitting through generations. And we have Holocaust. And also, you marvelously, Ali, mentioned about experience of Iranian Holocaust. And I almost cried. So, this is examples of collective trauma. One thing, that is unfortunately, in a way, all of us suffer from some kind of collective trauma because of war. According to one study, since the beginning of human history, more than 3,300 major wars have been waged. For the last 120 years, we have had 200 wars. And right now, there are 40 wars going on here and there. And let me tell you the nature of modern warfare. In 1900, 10% of casualty used to go to civilian people, 90% to military personnel. During the Second War, it became 50-50. And today, 90% of casualties go to civilian population and 10% to military personnel. In a nutshell, all wars are wars against civilians, especially women and children. And here, war makes the whole population traumatized, and that is collective trauma. Let me share some impacts of collective trauma. The first impact, collective trauma could come due to earthquake or tsunami, and we have had so many examples like that. But that is natural disasters, not man-made cruelty. Let me talk about some impacts. The first impact is shock. You don't know what happened to you. You are confused. You don't believe it. And you have lost yourself totally. That is why in almost all traumas, collective instances of collective traumas, so people many years after, they start criticizing themselves that we could have handled that trauma in a better way. So, because initially you are shocked, initially you are confused, everybody is confused, the survivors and also the community. That is why preparedness is very, very important. So, an understanding of the collective trauma. The second thing that happens, collapse of the community link. So under genocide, for example, in Rwanda, I was in Rwanda in 1996, I stayed there for 3 weeks. Even 2 years later, the challenge was how to bring community together, because people don't trust one another, and community life is gone. And deterioration of values. There are so many values, traditions that bind people together in this instance of massacre or genocide or war. They lose those values. And those values are not replaced by new values. What to do? You are in a state of uncertainty. You don't know who you are. You have lost yourself. And it's very dangerous, because it's possible to build, destroy all the infrastructure destroyed by war. But it's not possible to rebuild those values that are gone forever. One Nigerian writer says, center cannot support. Everything is getting disintegrated. And a priest, a Jesuit priest who was murdered in El Salvador, Ignatius Martin Barrow said, war makes the whole society polarization of society. That is another impact of collective trauma. Culture of fear and mass intimidation. So it is not only victimizers who try to spread culture of intimidation to rule and to continue with occupation or with their atrocities. Also, victims feel intimidated. And I give you some examples. For example, under Duvalier in Haiti, they erected his statue everywhere with two eyes looking at everywhere and turning to intimidate people that obey him. So otherwise you will be in trouble. And you mentioned earlier about torture. One of the aims of torture is intimidation. Torture is going on and don't raise your voice. Another byproduct of collective trauma is silence. Today, under many tyrannical regimes in the world, you have culture of silence. So, in countries like Jordan, in countries like Saudi Arabia, in many Middle Eastern and Muslim countries, and in my country of origin, Iran also. That is, the silence helps tyrants to continue their rule. Culture of hate, and again, unfortunately, not only by victims, also by victimizers both. I give you one example that is, so some people may not like it, but in Palestine, for example, Israeli government and fanatical Jews hate Palestinians. And unfortunately, Palestinians also hate Jewish people. It is at a mass level. It is not just coming from the government. And culture of hate is ruling, and it should definitely be replaced by a culture of law. But it's a great challenge. Another impact of collective trauma comes to children. Children don't know what is happening. They just, even the way they play with some kind of dolls look like weapons. And that they carry this trauma up to their adulthood. And even when the situation changes, they have that trauma. And if they want to make a society suffers from a kind of hidden, subconscious, collective trauma. And that is also horrible. Another issue is under the condition of war and genocide, parents lose their authority to support children. And as culture of violence also develops, because violence has the last say, and everything is resolved by violence, and even victimizers, they resort to some kind of violence, and sometimes terrorism, because we have two types of terrorism today, state terrorism and non-state terrorism. They nourish each other, and they are two sides of the same coins, although non-state terrorism is defensive and state terrorism is offensive, but they belong to the same category. And unfortunately, terrorism also is a byproduct of the atmosphere of collective trauma and violence. Now I come to healing. Is there what to do when there is collective trauma? First, I want to criticize Western approach to trauma. So they say, okay, there are some clinical methods to heal them. No. Clinical methods? Western caregivers, they are not aware of culture of oppressed people. They don't know. I am a doctor. You are a patient. You should listen to me, nothing else. It is medicalization of human life. Extremely dangerous. And what if you make a mistake, doctor? What about the discipline if there is something wrong with the whole discipline? Alexander Herzen, a 19th century socialist, said, You are not doctors, you are disease itself. And I remember after 9/11, one of my clients from Afghanistan went to a physical practitioner, his own family doctor, sharing his problem. And the doctor said, "Are you from Afghanistan?" "Yes, sir." "Are you a terrorist?" Horrible. And my client immediately left the clinic, came to us. It took us 10 days. We mobilized the whole center, our psychiatrist, psychologist, trauma counselor. Then gradually he came back to from his traumatized condition. What to do when this kind of approach is wrong? We have holistic approach. Those who are victims of torture, those who are victims of war, genocide, and crimes against humanity, more than some pills that most of the time don't help, they need other types of support. They need, first, to establish themselves. They need settlement and resettlement support. They need housing, they need job, they need language training. And that is not possible by a medical practitioner to do that. Secondly, they feel terribly lonely. I call it loneliness of exile. Believe me, when a client comes to me, I ask for, give me a phone number of a friend, a relative. If I can't reach you, I reach that person. 75% of them, they don't have any phone number. They suffer from loneliness of exile. We match them with befrienders here. They need those types of support, holistic support, based on community. Community is very, very important. And no, I come to the community because one reaction to collective trauma is solidarity in the community and rehabilitation by the community itself. I give you one example in Ireland. The war was going on for 30 years, and the stats of referring to mental health hospitals was constant, the same. What does it mean? Despite escalation of war, same people went to psychiatric hospital. It means that community had some mechanism to heal its member. Under atmosphere of collective trauma, community support and community solidarity are extremely important. And then when we come to second or third generations, one thing is important is recognition. You need recognition. So people don't deny my experience, what I went through, what my people went through. I told you about Armenians, Assyrians, Jewish people that still are looking for recognition. And also, I suffer, as Ali mentioned, that there is no recognition for what happened to our people. Still, there is no recognition. And it's very sad. So, and global recognition. I tell you, during the 2004 tsunami in South Asia, we had global security. Of course, it didn't cure the pain, but it was extremely helpful to survivors when the whole world feels empathy with you, feels solidarity with you. And then I come to impunity, addressing impunity. Again, when during transitional justice, when war is over, genocide is over, there is a need to bring perpetrators to justice. I told you I went to Rwanda in 1996. People were speaking of three things. The first one, justice. Second, reconciliation. Third, reconstruction. justice is important. There is a kind of slogan among my Iranian, so we don't forget, we don't forgive. I agree with the first part, but I don't agree with the second part. Because under certain conditions there should be forgiveness. When truth are known, when perpetrators so apologize, when victims and survivors accept, there should be some kind of forgiveness. Otherwise, so there is no continuation of a compassionate life. But anyway, truth should come to the fore, and apology should happen, and perpetrators should be punished. But of course, not in the same way as they perpetrated atrocities against us. We are not them, we are different. And finally, under the atmosphere of collective trauma, when trauma and atrocities or genocide, and as you see in Iran, all types of oppression and repression and suppression are going on. What to do? Is there any treatment? Is there anything to relieve? I say yes. Continue with your struggle. I want to share with you a historical example. During Algerian war, there was a psychiatrist called Frantz Fanon. He was head of a psychiatric hospital. One day, he submitted his resignation, and he said, if the aim of psychology is helping human person to come out of trauma, but under the colonial war, Arabs are going through trauma on a daily basis, and trauma reproduces itself. Psychiatry cannot help. He resigned and he joined the ranks of revolutionaries. And sometimes collective trauma, so collective trauma doesn't mean the end of life. It's very sad, it's very upsetting, it's horrible, but it could bring solidarity among people, as it is happening in occupied territory of Palestine to do. They have mass funeral, they have mass collaboration, and in that way, they don't remove collective trauma, but they alleviate collective trauma. Very important, very, very important if people go with the same feeling of fortitude. Fortitude means capacity to face danger, to face risk, and capacity to stand firm and resist. In my view, collective fortitude only comes when there is collective solidarity and cohesion among people. Let's cherish this today. And there are so many things that could lead to global trauma. For example, environmental disaster. For example, war. So the lots of armaments and nuclear ammunition are there in the arsenals of superpowers that could explode the planet Earth maybe 1,000 times. We are living in this age of fear. What to do? We should prepare ourselves, and we should consolidate our solidarity and also consolidate our fortitude for the future that comes. And I don't think is not better than the past, but all we need to just rally together, stay together, work together, and struggle together. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to be here with you and be part of the social forum this year. There is no voice. I'm trying my best. And As you see, there is technical problem, but I said to my friends that I'm here because there is a reason I'm here. As an ex-political prisoner, during the 5 years that I was in the jail, I was witness of massacre, I was witness of execution, and I lost many friends during the time. So, from the time I got freedom, I promised myself to be voice of them, and always I'm standing for them as long as I'm alive. Today, Brian, my very dear friend, is with me, and he's playing for me as always. I think we have some common social belief. And we have
it's an honor for me to be here and certainly to accompany Shirin. But I think it's also very important that art is an essential factor of all change. And the truth of the matter is, when the repressive regimes try to control the people, they always start with the artists. So when we can't sing anymore, then we can't fight. So it's a great honor for me to be here with Shirin. And I hope, I know.
So I prefer not singing in mic because, anyway. I choose the poem from Ahmad Shamlu, Common Love. And yeah, I'm going to sing for you. Tear is a secret, laughter is a secret, love is a secret. The tear of that night was laughter of my love. I'm not a story you can tell, not a melody you can sing, not a voice you can hear or something you can see or you can know. I'm a common pain, scream me, I'm a common pain. Tree has a word with forest, grass with plain, and I with you. Tell me your name, give your hands to me, tell me your story and give me your heart. I have understood your roots. With your lips I have spoken for all the lips. Your hands are familiar with my hands. For the sake of those who are alive, I wept with you in solitude. I have sung the most beautiful songs in the darkness of cemeteries, because this year's death very love more than anyone alive. I'm talking to you, whom I found very late. Your hands are familiar with me, like a cloud with fields, like a rain with ocean, like a bird with springs, and like a tree that talks with the forest. Because I have understood your roots, because my voice knows your voice. I'm a common pain, screaming.
چیزی چنان که ببین apologize after that beautiful voice and after that beautiful dance. You have to listen to my, coarse voice. And in case I fail to, continue, please accept my apology. And that's why I'm sitting, because, otherwise I may not be able to continue. And it's a shame, not to have this discussion. Iranian revolution was a very unique revolution, I think. It was probably one of its first kind. My prediction is we would have a lot more of this in future. So this is actually a sign of an era. Why was it unique? Because I think it was both a revolution and a counter-revolution. You could say it was a revolutionary counter-revolution, or a counter-revolutionary revolution. Why do I say that? I mean, from two angles you can, look at that. One is what we overthrew is, in fact, to be honest, was more progressive than what replaced it. We overthrew monarchic dictatorship to have a religious fascist dictatorship. 110 years after the Iranian Democratic Revolution, we have achieved a theocracy. So you can see in historical terms, the result is counter-revolutionary. And it is also counter-revolutionary in the sense that the Iranian Revolution was indeed a revolution. At its height, it involved 10 million people in activities, in protests, in strikes, in fighting the army, the police, etc. In the last 4 months of it, you had general strike involving 3 million workers. The middle classes were involved in this revolution. The urban poor was part of this revolution. So it was a mass movement. It wasn't just some conspiracy. There was an eruption of revolutionary crisis because of the economic crisis of 1975-76. That's what brought it about. So in both sense, in the sense that it did not achieve the demands of these masses which participated in this revolution, it was also counter-revolutionary. The demand of the masses for work, for employment, for freedom, were part of that revolutionary movement. So in that sense, the government which came after the insurrection betrayed all those demands. So it was counter-revolutionary in that sense too. But nevertheless, the same people who led this revolution are the same people who took power. And this is the contradiction. This is the peculiarity and the uniqueness of the Iranian Revolution. And I just want to sort of bring to your attention what are the reasons for this. Firstly, you have to understand what happened in the Iranian White Revolution, which is 20, 30 years earlier than this. The Shah carried out what he called the White Revolution. So the Iranian Revolution is actually directly a reaction to that. What was White Revolution? In terms of economic development, what it achieved was a very substantial period of industrial growth. The Iranian economy grew tenfold probably during the 10, 15 years after the White Revolution. Iranian working class increased, say, from 1.5 million to about 4.5 million in this period. So there was a huge growth. So you can say this was fantastic economic development. But this economic development produced, at the end of 15 years, almost 7 million urban poor. And there you can see the contradiction. Capitalist growth has actually pushed us back. It developed a level of industrialization, but it created huge unemployment. agrarian revolution, agrarian reform by the Shah, the land reform by the Shah, resulted in 40% of the peasant population migrating to towns. They were released from land, therefore they had to find jobs. So they went to cities looking for jobs. In the first few years, it was okay. They were absorbed by this growth. But gradually, the growth reached its limit and it could not absorb all these migrants coming to town. So, in fact, because of that, it created many different aspects of backwardness. One was reliance on family labor. You see huge growth in family labor, in basically unpaid labor, because people have to survive. You see huge growth in shanty towns around major cities. In Tehran, you had almost 700,000 people living in shanty towns. So what I want to bring to your attention is this capitalist growth is the actual culprit here. Why did this happen? Because basically this type of capitalist growth, which was initiated by USA, has its limit. Why was it? Because they basically wanted to produce consumer goods for the internal market, basically by joint ventures with imperialist capital, which initially, as I said, led to a huge growth. But this type of capitalist growth is limited by its nature. Why? Because there is no exchange between the actual businesses, basically. You're producing just for consumption by the consumers. There is no exchange, business to business exchange, because we don't produce any means of production. Unless you produce means of production, there is no internal market between the two sectors of your economy. So gradually you reach this limit. You gradually reach a limit in which you can no longer absorb what you force out of the means of production. Because this capitalist growth releases more and more people from their own livelihood, but there is no factory to absorb them. So this is the situation. Secondly, because of all the previous historical interventions by foreign powers, we don't have the resources to cope with such a situation. Let me explain. In 1906, we had a democratic revolution called the Iranian Constitutional Revolution. This was defeated by Russian and British imperialism. They brought back Asiatic despotism. Then, during the Russian Revolution, there were new upheavals in Iran. British carried out a coup with the Cossack army that was left over by the Russian imperialists to put Reza Shah on the throne. He first became the Minister of Defense, then later on he became the Shah, the new Shah, the father of the last Shah that we overthrew. During the Second World War, as some of you know, we were occupied by the Allies, and after that they overthrew the Shah and put his son on the throne. There was again a huge political upheaval in Iran, which led to the movement for nationalization of the oil and rise of Mossadegh to power. Mossadegh was sort of an elected, semi-democratic type of government, which was then overthrown by a coup by the Shah, by US imperialism, to bring back the Shah. So you see all these progressive forces that we have Iranian society has thrown up in the last 100 years of its history have been one by one defeated by intervention, not by internal reaction. Internal reaction did not have the power to defeat this because there was these movements, but by help from outside, by intervention from US imperialism, basically over the last period. So what happened is, this is basically the problem here now. We have this upheaval. It starts in 1975 with the economic crisis. 1976, you see beginning of the mass movement, strikes, but all very isolated. 1977, you have huge clashes between Arab and poor, and the military forces. And then you have the 2 years of the revolutionary crisis. Again, we have, to thank US imperialism for the mess which follows. What US imperialism and its, mouthpieces are trying to tell you is, look, there was a revolution, we didn't want it, we didn't expect it, and we tried other better alternatives, but we couldn't find anybody to lead this. So, at the last resort, we said, okay, let's deal with Khomeini. But this is an absolute lie. Because this alternative was created by US imperialism itself. It is not that we had no alternative, therefore we turned to the mullahs. But the mullahs were created by US imperialism as an alternative. And the deals go back at least 2 years before the revolution. Now they are trying to say, the last 3 months, yes, there was some negotiation between USA and Khomeini's leadership. But this happened 2 years before that. The 3 persons who represented Khomeini in the sort of Western political world were all CIA agents. You all know now, they were all CIA agents. I mean, I was at the time abroad in England, studying in England. I was a member of Confederation of Iranian Students. So we were aware of all these opposition groups. We knew all these groups. Yeah? And the religious opposition, which later on became so powerful, to be honest, was nobody. They couldn't hold a meeting with 20 people, I mean, we ignored them, basically. They were so insignificant. Suddenly, 2 years before the revolution, they would have meetings, 500 people in the room. They had huge money all of a sudden. Huge amount of money poured into religious groups abroad. They had newspaper, conferences, movies, This was being pushed. This was being helped. Now, I cannot prove any of this, of course, but by evidence that you can see all around you, there was obviously some force pushing the religious leadership to the forefront of this mass movement. If you remember, they brought Khomeini from Iraq, put him in Paris, center of world attention, to present him as the leader of the Iranian revolution. So what I'm trying to say is US imperialism actually saw the revolution 2-3 years before, saw the signs of the revolution. Don't believe, we were, surprised, as much surprised as you were. No, they knew. I mean, we knew revolution is beginning, so how could they not know? They were all spying on us, so at least they could have heard from us that a revolution is coming. And they perfectly well knew this. So they started, and they were worried about this. Because this mass movement, Iranian revolution, could play a very significant role in the whole region, as the oil nationalization played a very significant role in the whole region. So in order to stop that happening, and in order to stop the revolutionary mass movement achieving anything, they pushed these so-called anti-imperialists so that nobody would get, surprised that why are these people leaders of this revolution? They were anti-imperialists also. Verbally, they would say the worst things against US imperialism too. But behind the scene, US imperialism had reached agreement with them, and because of this, pushed them to the forefront of the Iranian mass movement. Why? It's ever so simple. To safeguard the bourgeois state, to keep the bourgeois state intact after the revolution. When the revolution took the day of the insurrection, I was in Tara. Next day, after the insurrection, it was announcement, 14 military committees in Tehran took power. They were led by an Ayatollah Khamenei. Those of you who are Iranians would know his name. This guy was released from jail, Savak jail, a year and a half earlier. Are you telling me Sadak didn't know he's building these 14 military committees during the period just before the revolution? How did this happen? I mean, next day after the insurrection, as if nothing has happened. The city was quiet, as if nothing has happened. There was a huge insurrection, but immediately they took power with these 14 military committees. And when you see how this state starts the day after attacking all the mass movement, you realize what was planned. They started attacking the workers, national minorities, women. Every social group that opposed it was suppressed in the next period. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is, first of all, capitalist growth under imperialism produces worse condition than improvement. Even industrial growth, this type of capitalist growth produces such unemployment, huge unemployment, and huge groups of urban poor. This provided sort of the shock troops for the counter-revolution to actually defeat the rest of the masses. They used this to suppress the rest of the mass movement. This is basically what happened. And when you see the murderous activities of this regime after the first year or so, you realize what its role was. And this is, I think, what our talk today is about. I hope I have covered the main point I wanted to say. If you allow me, I think I stop here. Yeah?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm a former political prisoner. I spent 4.5 years in Evin and ثالث. I try to be as short as possible because I know many other factors going to be other aspects of prison, torture will be covered by my other fellow panelists. So I'll try to just focus on women and political prisoner and Evin basically in ثالث, which I was held during the 1980s. 1980s, I'm sorry. To just that the aspects of there was exclusive to women. We went through what we went through. Basically, the rest of it we shared the same process, the same interrogation methods, and the same tortures and same experience. Being a woman in some place like Iran, Islam-stricken countries, is already very difficult, but because based on Sharia law, if you're not obeying or violating any of those areas of Sharia law, what is being interpreted by Islamic Republic, you are waging a war against God, and especially against Islamic Republic. And being a female political prisoner, so obviously that is much worse. So I'm trying to focus in that area. Under Islamic Republic, the rule is you're woman, you're female, your basic duty of the woman is to go home and raise devoted Muslim and be trying to meet whatever needs your husband or the male of your family needed. Normally, it would cause lots of retaliation from Islamic Republic toward women. I was arrested way before of the mass incarceration happened. That was in, if I'm not wrong, June 20th of June 1980 was political coup, to be honest. It was political coup because it was in a very short time, so many political dissidents were arrested. And I was, about a couple of weeks before I got arrested, I was in Evin. So the situation, the atmosphere was so different. We didn't know what happened. I'm trying to reflect what I personally, excuse me, I experienced and what I saw. In the beginning of in the early 1980s, Islamic Republic attacked, it was well-organized attack by Hezbollahi pro-Khomeini militia, started on the meeting places, newsstands, book stands. Everybody in my generation probably remember those days. That was the beginning. And I remember, I really am dying to say this because everybody knows about ISIS everywhere. We experienced firsthand, not like, I mean, it's not metaphorically, it's actually literally. I remember the people who were in Tehran, they remember, we were having a newsstand or book stand everywhere. In the central of Tehran, there was a group, organized talks. They were funded, they were trained, they were ordered by revolution committees in Tehran. And I remember they were all black. They were wearing black. They were called themselves Siyah Jamagan in Persian, black clads. So when I see ISIS, automatically I remember what happened. They were the same thing. They were carrying machetes, big knives, chain, everything you could possibly to think about. They would come out of nowhere and they start cleaning the street all the way everywhere political dissident were, or trying to have campaign or anything. Were beaten so badly during that time in the street. Gradually started to be the amount of attacks in terms of frequent and also extensive. It started in those days, not in June 20th. So I got arrested right before that. This is just a very short glimpse to what you expect as a woman when you go in. We did not have hijab in that time. It was not mandatory for everybody in that time, just for employees of public sector. So obviously we didn't have anything. We were just normal, just like the way I look, almost. Upon your arrival in Evin, the very first thing they did, we were 4 of us. They greeted us. We were handed to a few guards. We were beaten up right there to just let us know what is the taste of being present. We were told actually, welcome to hell. So you start your journey right there through the process of, we didn't have blindfold at that time. You go to, excuse me, through the normal administration process, fingerprinting, mock shots, and initial interrogation. In that time, the interrogation did not involve with any kind of torturing to reveal or extract any information. That wasn't the tactic in that time. So we were transferred to a single cell with three of us in one small cell. I'm just going to go through, because I have to finish on time, what happened in a few weeks after that. This is what I experienced. I have to go through it in a point form. First of all, I have to mention this as well too. Islamic Republic started right in 1979, especially in the 1980s. They started well-organized, trying to change the prison system by centralizing them and expanding them. So in that time when I got arrested, Evin, one of the very infamous prison in Tehran, was really overcrowded already. You just can imagine after a couple of weeks what would happen, because many massive incarceration happened right after on June 20th when Mujahideen publicly announced that they started the armed phase, and obviously a regime started to try their tactics, and so in a very short time they start executing everybody in those few minutes of court time. It was like a drumhead, that kind of drumhead court martial. In fact, they had, because you didn't have access to anything, and a lawyer or anything, or having a warrant for search or any kind of that, of course, was fairy tale. And as far as I personally experienced and witnessed during the imprisonment, Islamic law have no any definition or recognition for legal rights for political prisoners whatsoever. So we didn't even ask for it or demand for it, or being very resented why we don't have any access of those. We didn't know what we're supposed to do. So this is what I experienced. Shortage of medicine and medical attention, and also lack of access to treatment were a norm both in Abin and Ghazal, another very notorious prison. Access to other like normal and basic convenience and facilities were actually not many times. They were taken away, using it as a means of torturing you or pressurizing you, like hot water for taking bath. It came time we didn't have access to hot water, we didn't bathe, and considering that we were so many of us, we were under the torture many times, constantly. Personally, I had to, babysit my injury in my face for so long, and just try to peel the dried blood. It was coming from my chin, from my ear, and it wasn't only me. It was just common. It was a trend, and not having it was just aggravating the condition we were living. So all those, not having access to visitation, not having access to fresh air, and many all of those basic needs were actually denied to use it as a means of torture. That was just, we didn't even see it as a torture, because the real torture, thank you, the real torture was the beating, whatever tools they had, chain, and the common one was lashing the sole of your feet. And again, due to overcrowding, disease would spread very quickly, especially when there was no, or not at all, or limited access to sanitary materials or tools. There is no sanitary napkins or pads for women. It was horrible time. I didn't want to really talk about that. It was horrible, but I was just saying in a form, short form. And also, because of this, so many skin diseases and respiratory illness were present, and also lice, infection of urinary tract. I suffered a lot, still I'm suffering. It was very common with everyone. And seeing physician, access to dentists and medical care would take months. And of course, if you needed appropriate treatment to go to hospital or being seen by a professional, that was also just fictional, because you were there. I personally witnessed so many of the prisoners. They had epilepsy, they had chronic migraine. We didn't know what to do. They were just there, and they would go through so many seizures in a day. It depends on what type of punishment we were under, and that was really heartbreaking. Interrogation was carried out right after, as I mentioned, when the detainee would come in Abin usually, and later on it started with beating you first and then questioning you after, and depending on your responses, they would decide if you need more torture or no. And those interrogations would take weeks and months, and that all of it means when you go, you call, you're going to go straight on the table, the torture chamber. You're tied up, and start lashing you. And I have to say, Sharia law says it's, touching, any contact from male and with female is definitely forbidden. But however, in torture chamber, those laws by themselves was broken so many times. One interrogator would sit on you as a woman mostly in the middle part, on your leg and your chest, and so anywhere, and the other one would start beating you. So that was interrogation. After the interrogation, if you happen to escape the valley of death, you get some sentence, term of sentence, and you send out to Ghazalistan is, in that time, in 1980s, was most heavily populated of present in Iraq. And I was among the very, very first group of women we arrived there. And I'm going to say this, the very first thing they did, the same thing, welcome to hell, and start beating us up. And we were bombarded with a verbal abuse. What happened, even well, still they don't believe that they have political prisoners. They don't have political prisoners. And in 1980s, they had people regard, like, I mean, how much, how far, and how, close you were to Islam and Sharia law, and they view, you were called and named infidel or hypocrite or hypocrisy, infidelity, or apostasy. That's the only thing they were called you. There was nothing. For women, they did not even recognize that status. You were corrupted. You were there looking for husband, and many, many times. They would try to convince you, even you had a political view, a political stance, you had a certain principle. You were involved with political activities. You're not there. You were there to looking for a husband, even you were 17, 18, 19 years old, still a student. But they were trying to have this propaganda, to sell it out to the people, and also to you as a person. If you didn't see it, it wasn't invisible, but there was attempt by the organization, mostly left movement, political movement, you were there to be a sexual object, to be used for sexual favor to your counterpart male in those organizations you were affiliated with. And that, well, of course, the importance of this well-organized creation of a new culture, it might not affect me, somebody like me. We were there, we didn't want to, we resisted, but it was important. When you, because of all those, the horrible, horrendous execution, especially in 1981 and 1982 through to 1988, you had to stand back, you have to do a little bit of, like, I mean, a step down and try to save your skin. They wanted you as a woman. If you are giving in, you falling into that repentance culture, you have to, part of your confession, if you want to do confession, have to consist of this, that I was actually a sexual object by the hand of the certain organization you were associated with it. That was the main, and that was kept actually until the end. Every single one of them. For those people, they gave in. They start working with them. They start this new culture being ears and eyes of interrogator inside the ward and spying on us. Many of them, unfortunately, they couldn't even save their own skin. But all those they did for government, for the Islamic Republic, many of them, they got executed anyways. But a part of their confession has to consist of this. They knew that they're lying, but they were trying to just prove that how much they mean it, to justify all those crimes happened and took place by Islamic Republic, and they wanted to get out of this. So they feed this this fabrication by Islamic Republic. We were women, they seduced us and did and that, and they were just going by the lie. Actually, they sound very good. And on the other hand, another thing, it was trying to silence their families. The families, didn't have any means to go ask for their daughters what happened, to do something about it. That wasn't they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to be ashamed, and because their daughters dishonored them, being involved with that kind of corrupted culture and political activity for women, it was corrupted. It was not something honorable. So they couldn't say nothing. And if I have time, I want to say something about the women. We were all young, and of course many of the women, political prisoner, female political prisoner, who were pregnant or where they got arrested, they had their little ones with them. And that was very, very horrible. And I wasn't one of those, but I feel really, my heart goes out to them, because in many, many cases, these women, they had to calm down and swallow their pride. They swallow their principle, political principle, for just the sake of their child. Because it would happen times, they come and they would say, are you willing to denounce the organization you were affiliated with and announce and declare your loyalty toward Islamic Republic, and especially particularly Khomeini? And of course many of us said no, and we did our punishment. We get beaten up so savagely, and we were sent out to a solitary confinement or singular cell, and with the limited access of many things. Those women has to go through that just for sake of their children, to maintain that condition. Even was horrible, but they have to. During the interrogation, in many cases, I think motherhood was one of the most painful experience for those women as well, beside of everything else. And of course, those that are they were children, they were there, no toys, no enough, lack of formula, lack of diapers, and many things they went through. They actually grew up, some of them there. And so quickly, I have to go to the last subject. I will talk about this rape. I'm so sorry, I have to just rush through it. Rape. Rape was the very last step that was committed by Islamic Republic for young children. Based on this is like, I mean, you have to explain this based on the context of religious ideology. If you're a woman, when you get executed, you go straight to heaven if you're virgin. If not, they want to make sure that you go straight to hell. So what they did, all those young girls, average age of 17 maybe, and many of them, they were students, high school students, and they got right before go to execution, they were raped by the interrogators or fire squad, whoever. And right away, the execution would take place. We didn't know about it. Nobody talked about it because sexuality was such a taboo, even among us as a Marxist. Until we're partially it's been documented, I'm so glad, by Justice for Iran, by the families of those the executed one. They were told by the officials that, congratulations, your daughter, married one of blah blah or whatever, like a sira, something. And well, you can imagine, just imagine how hard it is to be violate your dignity as a human being. It has nothing to do with political view. It has nothing with your political principle. You as a woman, how you feel about it. You violated physically, emotionally, psychologically, and all those, and still you're going to, mostly you've been tortured right before the execution field, you're taken there, and then rape you. They wanted you to feel nothing, even before you go, you die. And that happened. Many of them, it's not been documented the amount and extent of this appalling atrocity they committed against us. At the end, I have a few minutes. Do I have a few minutes?
Yes.
Yeah. There is a saying, I don't know who said it, but there is a good saying. It says, well-behaved people never change their situation. And that was the whole focus on their culture. They wanted you to well-behave, to not be able to change anything. Those people, they've been in Ghazal, they remember the most ruthless head of official of Islamic Republic, head of Ghazal name was Haj Dawood. And in my opinion, he was one of the most savage, ruthless, brutal person I have ever met. And the other one is Lajwadi, the general prosecutor, and we called him Butcher of Evin. You just imagine why we called him. And this guy, this official, and many times they told us, I make sure, even you're not one of the repentant, you're gonna be, nothing left of you. You have nothing when you go out to lift your chin up. All the bridges behind you are broken. And you actually, and some of us, they did. We did, and we didn't start collaborating with them. But you just emotionally and psychologically so broken, you don't know what's wrong with you anymore. Because it has nothing with your political belief. It has everything with you as a human being and human dignity. They were taken away, they were violated, they were assaulted, you were insulted in any possible way you think about. I don't have time to elaborate about this. I'm sure my other fellow panelists, maybe they can talk about it in details. But many examples happen. You would actually desire death, to die the suffering and gradually dying. You see yourself dying, a piece of you every day. And that was, they wanted to have a new generation. If they couldn't kill you, you a well-behaved person, because nothing would change. That's what they wanted to have. To achieve political stability and stay that way. No opposition, no dissident, no anything. Everything in that framework of Sharia law, framework of Islamism, so stay there. They don't have to deal with. They use every invention, every intelligence they wanted to. And this person, that Haj Dawood, one of those smartest person in Islamic Republic, and that smartness was used to innovate many ways of torturing you, to break inside. I was lashed many times on my head, and it was not only me. All the people from my ward were taken there right before we go to the coffin. They say coffin. It was doomsday coffin, baskets, casket, or I'm sorry, I'm mixing up version of, and we called it boards, and that was one of the horrible places I ever said, and I probably was really funny. I'm smiling about it, because psychologically this is what one of our defensive mechanisms. We could not do anything. We tried to laugh it out. So he said, that was, he was actually lashing everybody's with a cable on the head. Why? They wanted to change it and move it physically. They said, the head of you, blah, 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 it has to be moved, and get the light of God to start to enlighten your brain, and you will see Islamic Republic is it's the last way of prosperity for humankind. That was they wanted to, and they were, all the lashes were on head. It was that's what they wanted you to devote to Islam. It's not just leave alone your political stance and everything. Just be. No, you had to return to one of those well-wearing Islamism. They actually proudly advertising this is the best position of a woman being and following, be subjugated and be being suppressed. This is, but on the other world, we're gonna be warden. that was they want from you. So that was why repentance culture started beginning. They wanted to suck out every bit of humanity out of you. And it is humanity. It's like compassion, empathy, sympathy, everything you can see as a symptom of humanity inside you, and you express it in that way, and based on that expression, you find what you want to do, find a way. You want to be devoted to for animal right, or environmental, or political, or whatever. Because of those essential aspects of humanity, and that they wanted to make sure there is no even single cell to reproduce. You have to be turned to one of them. I'm sorry, I probably talked about so many things here and there, but I didn't have time to cover all of it. But I'm just going to finish with this: the magnitude or intensity of these crimes, those crimes, and violence against the political dissident reached threshold of brutality in 1988, which we didn't cover. Probably maybe it's going to be mentioned. And I want to say that one of those, the witness survivor, we're not going to forget. It's against humanity to forget. A couple months ago, there was a soldier, Nazi soldier, was 95, probably you heard it. He got 5 years. 5 years for 95 years old, it's like a life sentence. There was no evidence he killed somebody during that time, but he was charged with charge against crime against humanity. Why? He didn't kill anybody necessarily, but he was a member of a party who did. He killed millions of people. So in my belief, Islamic Republic, all those from the top to the bottom of them, everybody made sure that massacre happened during those still now, and some of them we know now in the United States, in Canada, and Europe, they become reformists, and we know it. We give them a microphone, we give them put them under the light. You know what? All of them responsible. And we make sure we're not going to forget about that. This is a piece of history. We cannot. It's not up to them. It's not up even to me. It's a part of human history. We have to make sure that it's not being forgotten, and they have to pay for the crime they made. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nوشین. Next speaker is Abani from Seattle, Washington. His title of speech is Two Eyes.
Yeah.